Hello and welcome back to the Spotlight Games podcast. Today we're going to be reviewing Oxenfree II Lost Signals. We're going to be talking about Season 2 of The Last of Us, and are we ever going to see it? Ever? And we're also going to be talking about handheld gaming. Some news came out of the EU that might change handheld gaming forever. I'm your host, Patrick. Joining me, as always, my sweet dumpster boy, Cayman Darty. Cayman, how are you?
Oh, boy.
Ooh.
Oh, boy, Patrick.
How you doing?
Patrick, I'm doing good.
You're doing good.
No, I'm doing good. Doing fine. Doing fine.
We're here, we're alive, we're talking about video games, which kind of brings me to my point of like, can it get better than this? Yes, it certainly can.
Can it? I guess
It certainly can.
It definitely could, yeah.
We have a lot of video games to talk about because this is the Spotlight Games podcast, where each week we spotlight the latest and the greatest in the world of video games. You can get it by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Spotlight Games Pod, or by searching for Spotlight Games in your favorite podcast app. And hey, you can be on the show by tuning in as we record live Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time on twitch.tv/Spotlight Games Pod. So be sure to follow us there so that you're notified when we go live, so you can be part of the conversation. Cayman, we've been back now several weeks. 3, I think we said off air.
Yeah, I think so.
And there's just, as I say in that little spiel, there is so much video game news to talk about and stuff to talk about. But I just want to take a second to say what a beautiful thing this is, and you are. You know what I mean?
Patrick, I've been so, as we all know at this point, I have a house now. So I'm moving into, I like to call it my yard dad era.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. So I moved into my yard dad era, and so I've been doing a lot of yard work. I've been very particular about my yard, and I don't have a lawnmower, which makes it very difficult to be a yard dad without
scissors.
Yes, I took a lot of methamphetamine, and then it's actually funny. My wife, one of the first houses she rented when she was in college.
Mm-hmm.
There was a dude who's like on crack, right? And he would come out and like trim his yard with scissors.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But either way, I borrowed a lawnmower from family, and we did a bunch of yard work this weekend.
Ooh.
And here's the thing about being Irish, Patrick.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how long I stay in the sun.
Yep.
I will get burnt, never get a fucking tan.
Yeah, no way.
I've spent so much time working on my yard in the blazing sun, getting I do all the things
down by those rays.
Right. We're in a wet bulb too. I'm still not 100% sure what it means, but I know it's very dangerous and global warming is real. Either way, still, which I guess, I don't know, like pros and cons is, well, I don't think there's any pros. The only con is I probably get melanoma. And I also don't get a tan.
Have you considered baby oil?
You know, I dated a girl, Patrick, whose mom used to lather up in Crisco and would go and literally bake in the sun. I think if you lather up in Crisco, you are literally deep frying your skin.
Correct. Well, especially in the year 2023.
Yeah, she got melanoma. So it's not funny. But also, you kind of ask for it if you lather up in Crisco and sit in the sun, and you're a ginger.
Hey, they didn't know better. Even
then, I still think they knew better.
They could drink and drive back then.
That is true. You know, when they took that shit away, communism.
Yeah. Fucking commies. I tell you what, brother.
Call me mommy.
We did call her the commie mommy famously. Came in since last week. I've been a busy boy. There's so 2 weeks ago we had the discussion, are there too many video games? I still say yes. Yeah. Because I've not played Zelda in 2 weeks, and it's like I've barely touched Final Fantasy 16. I still got to get back to Diablo. Came in.
Yeah, me too.
But since we last spoke, I've beaten 2 video games.
Hit me,
short video games.
Mm-hmm.
But before I jump into mine, I want to know, is there anything that you have to report to both me and our sweet audience that you've been playing? Or have you just been so busy baking in the sun?
Yeah, a lot of bacon in the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still chugging away at Final Fantasy 16. Man, I'm just really enjoying this game.
Are you still feeling like it's a front runner for game of the year for you?
I still think so.
Yeah.
I think the reason is like the pacing of this game is just really fucking good.
Sure.
And there's just moments in this game that I'm just absolutely blown away. I'm genuinely just like, this game scale wise is ludicrous.
Yeah.
And
It is so big.
the only game that I can think of that has ever made me feel like the same level of like, I am fighting something that is 100 stories high is just like God of War 3. I think is the only game I've ever played that has given me the same feeling of like, of this scale in combat.
Yeah.
And the music, I mean, we talked with our friend Nick. We talked about this with Nick about how incredible the score is.
God,
But
it's so good.
I think the thing is, there's games with really good scores that still aren't that good of games. I think it's how you utilize a score within a game. And I think Final Fantasy 16 is one of those examples of like, the score is so important to elevate what you're doing at any given point. If it had a mediocre score, I don't feel like I would be this high on it.
Sure.
But some of these huge set piece moments in these in this game are like, the score goes buck wild.
Yeah.
There's one moment where it was like a mixture of like electronica and metal during this fight. And I was like, am I playing fucking Devil May Cry right now? What is in a Final Fantasy game? What is happening?
Yes.
And it was awesome. So yeah, I've just been playing that. I do want to do a quick shout out though for all you fucking nerds out there.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Kai is now streaming on Hulu.
How about that?
You've
been watching that?
During work, I have it on the background. Already 40 episodes in. So
wow.
Yeah.
Churning and burning, brother.
Yeah, I love Dragon Ball, brother.
Dragon Ball was a craze that I just completely missed. I've maybe, I know, and it's like, I don't think it was like an active choice of mine. I just, as a kid, I guess the art style never like drew me in. I knew it existed. I just never like gave it a shot. And so I just completely missed it.
Were you a Toonami kid?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I watched a lot of Jackie Chan Adventures.
Oh, you were a Saturday morning cartoon.
But I was mostly a Saturday morning cartoon kid. There were definitely some Toonami shit that I fucked with for sure. But yeah, big Saturday morning cartoon kid. And then like whatever would come on right after school on those same channels, like fucking like X-Men. I'd come home and X-Men would be on, that kind of shit. I watched a lot of X-Men.
A lot of X-Men. Probably a lot of X-Men Evolution. Probably remember that show.
X-Men Evolution, dude. That show is so fucking good. Fucking fire in the chat for X-Men Evolution. If you've never seen it, go. It's on Disney Plus right now. I rewatched it once it came out on Disney Plus. That show's so fucking good.
Ends on a cliffhanger.
It does.
It's a bummer cliffhanger.
Fucking bummer. Bummer cliffhanger. Speaking of the chat, we got Terry in the chat. Hey, gents, hope you're well. We are well. I hope you're well, Terry. Thanks for being here. Always love having you in the chat. Cayman, since, as I mentioned, so 2 games that I have finished, both small games, and both of the same series. That series is called Oxenfree. Did you ever play the original Oxenfree, Cayman?
I did not.
So Oxenfree is an indie game. Originally came out in 2016, 17, 18. I forget the exact year, but it's one of those 3. It's like a side-scrolling, very, very narrative focused. Like it's pretty light on the gameplay. And I think, so I started playing this game when it first came out on Switch years and years ago. And it just like it caught me at a time where the story didn't immediately pull me in. And since there's like very little gameplay to it, I just never really went back. But I've always heard it talked about at such a high kind of love by a lot of fans. So I was like, you know what? 2 is finally coming out. It's getting great reviews. I'm going to go play it. I was at my parents' last week for a couple days. And so I brought my Switch, booted it up, finished it in 2 nights. Because they're both pretty short. I think the first one actually is a little longer. The first one I want to say was like 7 to 10 hours. Second one's like 5 to 7 hours. But just like, so the first one really enjoyed. If you've not played it, I would definitely recommend it. But the second one I was really impressed with. I think I finished it just before we went live. And I think I would start by saying, if you haven't played the first one, you can play the second one, but it's going to mean a lot more if you play the first one. It doesn't seem, not to like spoil anything by any means, but like it seems like it's its own story, but then like it definitely pulls from the first one in certain ways. And I think it would benefit you to play the first one. If for no other reason than to kind of understand some of the like world building and things. But just a really lovely, like it's been a while since I played just like a light, simple, like really fucking good story game. Like didn't try to pepper in all these systems. And I mean, there are some systems like you have this radio, which is cool, that like there's some people that you can like communicate with throughout the game in various parts of this island. And then that's a walkie-talkie. And then there's a radio that you can kind of dial in and around places to like unlock shit. And like it leans in the supernatural a lot. So there's a lot of supernatural shit going on.
So you say it's a side scroller. Are we talking like what type of side scroll are we talking? We're not talking. Are we talking beat 'em up, Metroidvania? Are we talking? No. What are we talking here?
The better description would be just a 2D game. But I mean, you are in ways side scrolling, but it's picture a map that it has a lot of kind of verticality to it at times, but it's a very simple, like usually they're like kind of set in and around the woods. So there's like paths, and you don't kind of walk out of the path. It's all, you're always on the path, and like it'll branch in various ways, and there's little things you can find, little collectibles and different ways that the story takes you. But the area of this game is like 3 times bigger, if I were to guess, than the first one. So it's just you kind of walking around exploring and like kind of following the narrative and kind of where it takes you, and uncovering cool shit as you go along. And you have a companion that both the lead character and the companion in this game knock it out of the park with their performances. Like Riley and Jacob love these characters. It's a game that does kind of, it seems like it would reward playing it again with more content. But to go back to the kind of age-old phrase on this podcast with there just being so many games, I don't know that I'm going to have the time to go back to it. I might just YouTube like what the different endings are and what kind of some of the different content is. But it did something. I think so often games, especially that are story driven and narrative driven and like dialogue driven, give you this sense of choice. And like, do your choices really matter, or is it just changing the color throughout? And this game did something for me that I thought was really interesting, where in multiple instances, it like changed my mind about what I thought about the characters in the world. Like, and that might, like, you might sit for a second and think like, that's not very special. But what I mean by it, I think to kind of provide more context, I think of Mass Effect. I think of a lot of Walking Dead games. And I feel like in a lot of those games, as you're playing it, you kind of immediately understand what you as a character think and believe and should do, and like what your moral compass is. Some of the games will let you be good, bad, anything in between. But it seems like, at least in my experience, I can only speak to my experience, that as you play these games, you kind of have this path that you're following. And it's like, oh, the good choice makes sense here. The bad choice makes sense here. The gruff choice makes sense here, kind of whatever those things are. But there were multiple times in this game where I'm like, I go into a conversation expecting to kind of lean one way, and the writing is just so good that I'm like, I'm really kind of at a crossroads here on whether or not I want to kind of change my character's kind of perspective. And that was fun. Like, that was just something I wasn't expecting from a game like this. When that kind of morality system usually feels very binary. So that I wanted to give a shout out to that too. But yeah, all in all, I would say like if you like that indie narrative focused, not a lot of gameplay, honestly, it would be a fucking great TV show type game. Oxenfree II, Lost Signals, I think you'll really, really enjoy. And if you've not played one, again, definitely go play one. They're both really affordable. I think one might be on one of the streaming services, whether it's PlayStation or Game Pass. If not, they're both like $20 tops.
Nice.
So yeah, highly recommend for sure. I don't know that this is gonna squeeze into like a top 3 or 4 game of the year for me, but it might be like 10 or 9 for sure. Like I definitely really enjoyed my time with it, and I was really impressed with Oxenfree II, Lost Signals. So you heard it here first, folks. Unless you heard it here somewhere else. Oxenfree II, Lost Signals. Buy now, play now. Cayman.
Yes, sir.
I've been rambling. I've been waxing poetic, some might say. But it's not stopping here because we got some Last of Us Season 2 updates from Nelly Andriva at Deadline. Last of Us, a show that we covered a ton on this show, and our Once Upon a Time sister podcast, Spotlight TV, where we reviewed Season 1, which I would think will be back if Season 2 ever happens, but that's what we're going to talk about right now. Nelly Andriva writes, HBO's Emmy-nominated The Last of Us was renewed in January, shortly after the adaptation of the most popular PlayStation video game premiered, quickly becoming a pop culture phenom. By May 1, when the writer's strike began and script work was put on hold, the new season had already taken shape. The Last of Us co-creator and executive producer Craig Mazin told Deadline in an interview tied to the series' big showing on Emmy nominations day, confirming the new writers who had joined him and fellow co-creator /EP the game's Neil Druckmann for season 2. Quote, we got pretty far, actually. We were doing great, Mazin said. Neil and I had been sitting and talking with Hallie Gross, who also worked on the second game as a writer, and Bo Shim, the new writer that was in our little tiny room with us. Obviously not a mini room because we're greenlit we're a real show, and because I hate that mini room stuff, end quote. Ending the fraught practice of mini rooms, heavily employed by streamers for series ahead of greenlight and renewal, is amongst the list of demands the WGA has been pursuing in its contract negotiations with the studios. Mazin revealed that episode 201, the premiere of season 2, has been written. Quote, we know what the whole season is, and I was actually able to get a write and submit the first episode right before the deadline hit, he said. So now I'm just walking around kind of brain writing, I guess, which I don't think is scabbing, which, sidebar, in case you don't know, scabbing is crossing the picket line during a strike. I take walks and I think through the scenes because when the bell rings and this is over, because the companies have finally come to their senses, I'm going to have to basically shoot myself out of a cannon because we really want to try and get this show on the air when it's supposed to be on the air, end quote. In the interview with Deadline, or in an interview in Deadline with Deadline in May, there we go, third time's the charm, HBO head of drama Francesca Orsi said that the expectation for The Last of Us is to return sometime in 2025. 2.5 months into the writer's strike and a day into an actor's strike, there is still possibility for season 2 to make its original delivery date, Mazin said. Last quote for now. We had a little more flexibility, I think, than normal, just because we had to wait a little bit longer anyway to line up production with the weather. A lot of what we do is outside, and so we had a schedule that weirdly hasn't been immediately impacted, but we're getting pretty close. We can't keep our original start dates forever, obviously, he said. If these strikes go much longer, we inevitably will have to push, and that hurts us, and it hurts the audience, and it hurts HBO. Everybody wants to get back to work. I think everybody that's actually doing the work, including the network people who are with us on the ground, I think everybody just wants to get this solved. So fingers crossed. Cayman, I come to you with this long story with more color we can bring in if we want. But some key things I think I wanted to discuss here. One, them saying that their goal is 2025, 2 years from now, which I think would make sense. Like the season ended, 4 months ago? 2 years makes sense with kind of today's model of this kind of prestige television.
Yeah.
But the actor strike just started. My question to you, do you think 2025 is a stretch, or do you think it's possible for us to actually see season 2 of this by that time?
Patrick, I struggle with answering this question mainly because historically speaking, I'm not a big TV guy. I'm very much a movie guy. However, with that being said, I do understand a little bit about how this works, being such a big movie guy, and understand something like The Last of Us, because you have to think like a normal movie is about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour 45. That's kind of, I think,
Yeah.
kind of the staple at this point.
For sure.
Obviously, movies can be longer, and we historically have said before we prefer movies 75 minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
In and out.
In and out. But with a TV show, you have to think how many more moving parts take place. With a movie, it's more relative, more focused. You're not going to have this like huge breadth of scale. Some movies will, obviously, but for the most part, they're more contained, right? With a television show, though, so especially something like The Last of Us, which has multiple locales over multiple seasons, things like that, and they have to work that in. That's really tough. That's incredibly tough. And you're also balancing a cast and crew that is much larger than a normal movie would be, unless you're maybe Marvel or DC. With that being said, I don't think 2025 is probably going to hit.
I don't think so either.
And I say that even more so under the like scope of like, this is prestige. This is not some like independent shit, small scale, where maybe these actors aren't part of some of these large, like SAG or AFTRA. And so because of that, like this strike, and I think that's probably where we need to start here. This strike is not, I think, like the last strike we had.
Correct.
This is much, much bigger. Because
bigger.
the first strike, and this is, you'd have to go back a ways. I think it was in, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 2012 maybe. Fact check me. But either way, that strike
was writers or actors.
They were just original writer strike. Which was one of the largest entertainment strikes I think we've ever had there's probably some back in the day.
2008 was the last one.
That was close. 4 year margin of error. So either way, so I think the thing is that the way that functioned, it was just the writers. This time is like the first time in I don't know how many decades that writers and actors both are striking at the same time.
I think the last time it happened was the 60s.
Yes. Okay. So that'll just tell you. So the magnitude of scale of this is not unprecedented, but we haven't done this in a long time.
Yeah. Last time they both struck was when residuals became a thing. So like that, a pretty fucking huge change to the industry. So that's kind of what they're hoping for this time too. So
just kind of give some like ballpark idea of what we're dealing with. When the writer's strike took place in 2008, as we just uncovered, the thing was they actually brought in non-union writers to write. So we still got stuff. This is very different now.
Right.
Like almost all of Hollywood is on standstill.
Right.
And it's going to be a war of attrition.
Yeah.
And so I think if you fundamentally understand how this works, you have people who are living paycheck to paycheck who are going on strike compared to these massive Hollywood studios that can't release anything until people want to work again.
Right.
And even a movie normally takes a year and a half, give or take, for it to come to fruition, unless you're something like The Flash that took like 8 years from start to finish. But I think the problem we run into here, Patrick, is I don't know when this is going to end.
Yeah.
And I think that's the scary part if you're both sides.
Sure.
Honestly, don't give a flying fuck about these studios. I really don't care about them.
They can burn.
The people being affected by the shit that they're trying to pull, like fucking Netflix is like, oh yeah, we'll pay you $150 to scan your face and use it as an extra in the background in CGI, is like ludicrous to me.
Yeah, I will be so shocked if this comes out by 2025.
Yeah.
I think that we are in this for the long haul, this strike. And because there was a response last night from the studio executives, or the studio side of this discussion, kind of replying to this like first set of asks, just down the whole line, rejecting everything.
Just fucking insane.
Like, when you read like the things that were being asked for, it's like, you are evil for saying no to this. And I think it seems, I've talked about before, like my previous life was in the acting world, but I was almost entirely in theater, not in film. So I was never union. I never really was in front of a screen very much at all, or in front of a camera very much at all. So my knowledge base is not that much higher than the average person on this topic, but I'm friends with a lot of people that are in the union, and that were at this rally in Atlanta last night. And so I've been seeing a lot like on social media today, and them kind of sharing what they've been kind of receiving from the top down. And it's like fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
The things that are being denied. So I don't know, man. Like I think this is going to be going for a while, and it's going to kind of trickle. And then there's the question of like, okay, let's say this goes on for 6 months. What even survives? I think Last of Us would survive, but I think there's a lot of shit that wouldn't survive. And I would even think that there's a lot of people who just like leave the industry. So yeah, it's a really kind of interesting kind of place that we're in. But I thought it was interesting, kind of going back to the article a little bit, going back to something that Craig Mazin said, talking about they already weren't planning on filming for a bit because of weather, which kind of, okay, put me in the mindset of The Last of Us. They're probably waiting for winter time because a lot of that game takes place during winter. So like there is that kind of cushion at least. But I do not expect this to be done by the time we get to winter. And even if it was done by the time we got to winter, it's going to take time to ramp up again. Like
in post, I mean, there's so much that
yeah,
goes into the shit. I would say 2026 release window sounds more realistic to me. Barring any additional setbacks that could occur. I mean,
yeah.
I honestly, I feel like there's going to be a strike coming up soon from like unionizing like our special effects studios.
Yeah.
Because like those people are mistreated as hell.
Yeah.
So like once you take that into consideration, if you just set aside any additional setbacks, like 2026 seems more reasonable. And honestly,
Yeah.
I think the one thing that The Last of Us has going for them that maybe other shows don't is that if they do a traditional, like if they go the way the games are, there's a decent gap, right? So they already had worked on like de-aging Ellie for the
Right.
show, the actor Bella Ramsey. They de-aged her for the show, but the thing is, there's still an age gap, and if you see her now, she still doesn't look like that much older.
Yeah.
So like honestly, it kind of works in their benefit, and you get an older Pedro Pascal.
Yeah. You get an older Tommy. I mean, yeah, that's a really good point. Part of me too, like the other piece of this that I as I was like thinking through, like, what are all of the kind of the different tendrils that this creates? No pun intended. With this strike, and I was like, oh, what if like some of the actors just like don't want to do this anymore? I don't think that that's going to be the case for The Last of Us though, because just as a quick shout out, last week when this kind of first was going live, Last of Us got 24 Emmy nominations, a lot of them in the acting categories. Basically everyone that had more than like 5 lines in the show got an Emmy nomination, and like, a bunch of special effects, bunch of directing, writing, all that shit. So pretty cool. I mean, definitely the most successful anything in terms of nominations from the video game world by a fucking country mile.
There is something I do want to point out, Patrick, before we move on to the next story.
Yes.
I was looking up, and the way that the Actors Guild and unions work and the Writers Guild unions work, they are separate entities from video games. So impact wise, unless they join on in a strike, right now it seems like for video games, at least in this regard, with like voice acting and writing and stuff like that, because they're very much like more insular, at least for the writing side. And then with the voice acting, the community is very different. It is looking like there probably be little to no impact, at least video game side, unless we see that side, which the video game voice acting community, they went on strike for, it didn't last very long, but they had a strike a few years back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too. What if we end up seeing? I think this would probably violate the terms of the strike, but I wonder if we all of a sudden start seeing just like a bunch of A-listers doing video games for a little extra money. I mean, they don't need the money. The A-listers. The strike isn't about the A-listers. The strike is about the people that I know personally. That are being mistreated. Also, quick little thing before we move on from The Last of Us. Did you see this other story? Won't read the full thing because I didn't bring it, but Gustavo Santaolalla, the composer, was on a podcast in Spanish talking about the game, and apparently basically let the cat out of the bag that they're planning on re-releasing part 2. In some capacity.
Which I'm not shocked at all by.
I'm not shocked at all by either. I think what I do want to know is it just like totally just like a re-release, throw PS5 on there on the box, and like frame rates maybe a little better, or like are they redoing shit? Because in the interview he talked about something that I had completely missed, and all the times that I played the game, he makes a cameo appearance in Jackson of the second game playing a banjo.
What?
And apparently the reason that he let this slip is that he said they're expanding his role in the remaster. And so like the speculation is that like maybe you can walk up to him and like hear him play more things and like interact with him that way. Like I doubt he's gonna be fucking going on the road with you,
dude. That'd be so good. He just always in the background, just playing a guitar. You're getting attacked, just fucking slamming that Spanish guitar.
It wouldn't surprise me though, like if with factions seemingly being in kind of development hell, Naughty Dog's gonna want to make a little bit of money.
Yeah, they gotta have something.
So I think a re-release of part 2, just another fucking excuse for me to buy this fucking game. But I'm gonna do it because I'm a sucker, Cayman.
You are a sucker for sure.
I'm a big old sucker, Cayman. Yes. This is something that you had brought to me. We discussed a little bit on Twitter privately, so you can't go find our conversation if you're.
You probably don't want to.
You probably don't want to
talking about each other's butts.
Yeah, we just kept taking every other sentence, just interrupting each other, talking about each other's butts. Yeah. But I'm pulling now from Victoria Kennedy at Eurogamer. This is about the EU, the European Union, making huge changes to handheld gaming. New handheld gaming consoles, such as future versions of the Nintendo Switch and Steam Deck, will need to have replaceable batteries by 2027, the EU has said. This comes as part of new regulation laid out by the Council of the European Union, which aims to, quote, regulate the entire life cycle of batteries, end quote, to ensure they are, quote, safe, sustainable, and competitive, end quote. The idea is batteries are easier to replace and recycle with a guarantee that, quote, portable batteries incorporated into appliances should be removable and replaceable by the end user, end quote, within new devices from 2027 onwards. The regulation says this timeframe gives sufficient time for operators to adapt the design of their products to this requirement, calling it an important provision for consumers. While handheld gaming devices are not mentioned specifically in the documentation, an EU representative confirmed to Overkill, quote, the batteries of gaming handhelds are covered by the batteries and waste batteries regulation, end quote. Further documentation stated a portable battery shall be considered readily removable by the end user, where it can be removed from a product with the use of commercially available tools without requiring the use of specialized tools unless provided free of charge with the product. It kind of goes on in a bunch of different ways, but essentially, this is saying it is better for the environment if these batteries can be removable and replaceable. I don't quite understand the science behind it, but I'm going to trust them because this is being led by some green commission of the EU. But I think that the interesting thing that kind of this brings to us, so they say by 2027 and beyond, by the year 2027, a new Switch will have come out. And by the year 2027, we would likely have been multiple years into the next Switch. But I find it difficult to believe that a Switch would release and then a couple years into the cycle, release a new version of the hardware that lets you remove the battery. Which begs the question for me, do we think this delays a Switch 2 so that it launches from, let's just say 2025 with a removable battery? Or Do you think that kind of what I thought wouldn't be the case? Let's say they release next year, and then in 2027, here's Switch 2.1 where you can remove the battery. Like, what do you kind of see as the future here, Cayman, based on this story from the EU?
So first things first, I think we need to calibrate our brains in terms of releasing consoles. Because here's the thing, Patrick. We've already gotten a second Switch. We're technically on the third Switch right now.
That is true. That is true. The OLED is the third Switch.
So is it possible? 100%. They could release a Switch 2 that comes out. And it could come out as early. I mean, my estimation was we would get one this year. I was wrong, obviously. Or at least I'm still technical. I mean, who knows what could happen.
Hey, anything can happen.
I think I'm wrong. However, I do think like next year there's got to be one, right? That gives them 3 years. I don't know how this works.
Sure.
Look,
you don't make switches yourself.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer. I don't know. I'm assuming it's very difficult. But at the same time, I'm also like, there's people much smarter than me that probably know how to do this. And there's probably a world in which they already have a design spec of the ability to have that built. Just even if they weren't even planning on releasing it, that's just something, right? So I could definitely see a world in which we get a new Switch next year, and then by 2027 we get the Switch 2 point whatever, or the Switch with the removable battery. It's a terrible name, but maybe that's what they call it. See, I could see them doing it. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. Part of me wonders if the reason why they're like it is more like eco-friendly to have a removable battery is because you can just take the battery off of like a Switch or whatever handheld. Whereas like now you essentially have to like destroy it to try to get to it. And then like, what is the damage being there? We are getting better with our ability to do things. I mean, I will say that like I was reading, this is a few months ago, I was reading, it was like the original Prius's battery was like one of the most eco-unfriendly things in the world.
Yeah.
But like now they've gotten to a point where it's like actually recycling a new Prius battery is much more like you can actually do it where the first one you can't. It just sits in a landfill.
Right.
The question is like, and this is, I think it's a bigger problem is, do they do it at all anyway? Are they just like, go fuck yourselves, we'll pay the fines, we don't give a shit? Because we know corporations just do that. They're like, we make enough money to not give a flying fuck.
Sure.
Eat ass. They just do whatever they want.
There is a thing later in the article that I think kind of helps answer that question of is it the full, like having to replace it, which I think probably is still part of it. But they say batteries, excuse me, got a little frog in there. Batteries are key to the decarbonization process and the EU's shift towards zero emission modes of transport. At the same time, end-of-life batteries contain many valuable resources, and we must be able to reuse those critical raw materials instead of relying on third countries for supplies. Third countries for supplies. I don't know if that's a
third world.
Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because I think that we don't say that anymore. I think.
Oh, well then I'm sorry.
No. I think that's, as you said, I was like, oh, right. I think for that, it's been decided that is.
Okay. Well, I learned something new every day, Patrick.
Yeah, every day. Hey, I've said worse on this podcast.
We've edited out worse on this.
Exactly. So yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right though. As you kind of speak through that, especially if they do hit next year, that does give them 3 years. And I totally forgot that they released a second Switch that was just like this Switch, like charges better or something.
Or it doesn't. No, it doesn't dock. It didn't dock.
Oh, well, there was that one. There was the mini, but there was a second. There was a version 2 of the Switch that wasn't the OLED, and it was something to do with the battery. I forget what it was.
The battery life was, it was like stopped. It was like the battery wasn't, or the Switch wasn't warping because they had like some like cooling agent or something involved. But yeah, you're right. So technically like a 4th version of the Switch now.
Yeah. So then I guess maybe something that we don't know as consumers or as, lay consumers is, I guess these batteries in these consoles are like really fucking bad for the environment.
I mean, I mean, these lithium-ion batteries are not good.
Yeah.
That's definitely not good. But I think if we think about this though, if we remove like the context of all of it and just look at like consumer vision, right? Blinders on to impact of nature, which I think we don't need to do that because our world's literally on fire right now.
Yes.
Like actually on fire. So I think if you just are a fucking dickhead and you just put blinders on, you're like, I don't care about the environment. I just care about my own self gratification. Honestly, it's kind of nice that say if you're on a long road trip, especially if you're someone who has a Steam Deck and the battery lasts 2 hours and that's it.
Fuck, you're right.
And you're like, I can't just constantly be charging this thing. Just pop one out, bing bang boom. Fucking roll with it, dog.
That's a good point too. Yeah, having being able to carry around a second battery for and not suck the energy out of the fucking earth to recharge it. Yeah, interesting.
So, I don't know.
So we'll see. Maybe it's one of those things. Like there was a thing last year when the EU said Apple, since Apple's fucking Apple and they make their own chargers, they were like, you can't do that anymore. And that's starting to go into place next year. So maybe it's one of those things like we're really not going to see a difference. It's just business. But yeah, I hope it doesn't mean that Switch 2 is delayed, but you've convinced me it won't be.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't for like I guess the thing is if the EU is like, hey, here's the thing. You can't like once you hit 2027, no more of these can be released than like I still don't think that's gonna happen. I still think that they're gonna have. It just might be one of those where they're on shorter supply, and then all of a sudden we see like the launch with the removable batteries.
Yeah. Well, come back in 3 years, 4 years, and we'll see what happened on Spotlight Games episode 319 or whatever the fuck. Cayman, today's a quick one.
Yeah,
but we do have. I did pull in some updates to the calendar, some things that are out, some things that are coming out that are releasing, etc. that I wanted to talk about. PlayStation Plus, as of today, you can play It Takes Two, your game of the year of what was that, 2 years ago? Last year? 2 years ago?
Yeah, fuck yeah. It Takes Two is amazing.
The Ascent, which is a game that I tried once. Did we play that together for like a day and then or did I just play that alone?
I think you just played that alone.
Yeah, I only played it today. Undertale, a game that I've always wanted to play. World War Z, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, a game that I'm definitely trying out. Fast and Furious Spy Racers, Rise of Shifter, spelled SH1FT3R, Cayman. Never heard of this fucking game, but I'm downloading it. My Little Pony, a Maritime Bay Adventure, Cayman. If you have any time, you want to review that for the pod next week, I'd love that. And Sniper Elite 5, all up today on PlayStation Plus if you have that. Oh, and Twisted Metal 1 and 2, I guess ahead of the show coming out. And then some Game Pass editions. We got Tectonica and Toem today. Tectonica is a pre-release or like an early access game, but Toem is a game that came out, I think it was last year or 2 years ago. It looks cool. It's like a black and white indie like photography, cute, cozy game. So I want to check that out. And then a game that we wouldn't have talked about on the podcast, but you and I talked about a long time ago, Maquette, which launched on PlayStation years ago. July 19th coming to Game Pass. And on July 31st, one of the best games ever made, Celeste, coming to Game Pass. So if you've never played Celeste, give that a shake on Game Pass if you have it. And then two other things I wanted to mention today. Viewfinder, a game I talked about on the podcast a few weeks ago, out on PlayStation. Might be out on other places, but I only know of PlayStation. Downloading on my PlayStation tonight. Hopefully I'll be able to talk about that next week. I've heard it's only like 2 or 2.5 hours. So I might be able to do a full review again next week for Viewfinder. And then also little sad news, or not sad news, but news to share about a game being taken off Game Pass that I know my wife plays and some people in our audience play. 2 Point Campus leaving Game Pass into this month. So if that's a game that you play, also Marvel's Avengers, although I think that game is dead anyway, and The Ascent. I guess The Ascent is leaving Game Pass to go to PlayStation. I guess PlayStation gave them a better deal than Xbox could. So that's leaving Game Pass at the end of this month.
Patrick.
Cayman.
Can I bring in one? Can I bring in one last?
Come
story
on.
before
We're only 44 minutes in. Bring it in, baby.
I'm gonna bring one last story in, Patrick. This comes from Ted Litchfield at PC Gamer.
Ooh.
And this is something that I think it just will tie in last week's episode together.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit more about Baldur's Gate 3, Patrick.
Let's go.
All right, so this is from Ted Litchfield at PC Gamer. The title of the article is "The 6 Weirdest, Most Exciting Subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3 That You Can't Wait to Play." I'm just going to briefly run through these because these, okay, here's the thing. You said I could fuck a bear. Honestly, intrigued.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Not sold on the game. Hear me out.
Listening.
Okay. I'm just going to briefly run through this. So there's six subclasses. So here's the thing a little bit about Baldur's Gate 3 to give you a little bit of it. It's Baldur's Gate 3 is a lot like Diablo in the sense of like, it is like a traditional kind of dungeon crawler. But where Diablo is very linear to the terms of like, you have like, it's just that's your class and then you can slightly change it. Baldur's Gate really goes out of its way to be like super immersive. It's like a true immersive sim. So number 1 is College of Swords Bard. What is it? It is a jack of all trades spellcaster melee damage dealer, also known as a quote-unquote blade. Pick this class if you want extensive dialogue, non-combat options, and to hold your own in melee. Basically, you're a bard who can summon a shit ton of swords and just play a guitar that shoots swords.
Yeah.
Okay?
Fucking bars rule.
Fucking let's go, right? This is my personal favorite, Circle of Spores Druid. What is it? Stinky Mushroom Man.
Oh boy.
Pick this class if you want to enact the will of the spore gods.
Ooh, I know you do.
A mushroom god. This is a literal quote here. Stinky boys rise up. You apparently this druid subclass is permanently surrounded by a halo of mushroom spores.
Wow.
So yeah, stinky boys rise up. Let's go. All right, here's the third is Way of the Shadow Monk. What is it? It's a stealth and ninja themed martial artist. Pick this class if you want to move around the battlefield quickly, hitting enemies from the shadows. Essentially, you are a stealthy ninja monk, which pretty fucking cool if you ask me.
Pretty fucking cool.
Here's one of my personal favorites. Gloomstalker Ranger. What is it?
Ooh.
A shadows and darkness focused edgelord.
Oh god.
Pick this class if you want to ambush enemies from stealth whenever possible. There was something in here that's like really fucking funny about it. Basically, the picture of the character is just he's got like the old like 2008 emo haircut.
Yes, he does.
I'm just saying.
Come on.
If like your theme song while playing this isn't Hawthorne Heights, then I don't know what to do, brother. Here we go. The next one up is Oathbreaker Paladin. What is it? A paladin subclass, unlike by breaking paladin law. Pick this class if you want to be a real sad sack, edgy guy with nothing to lose.
Unbelievable. These all sound incredible.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
I learned something about Baldur's Gate 3 this week that I'm actually considering playing it now because I wasn't. Like it was just a joke to me, especially with the bear fucking. And we had said, I don't think we ever talked about it on the podcast, but you saw an article that was like there's like over 200 hours of cinematics or something like that in this game. But I was reading about the gameplay of Baldur's Gate 3 and how it's like one of their goals with the game is to make it feel like D&D so much so that like you roll during conversations, you roll like during combat, and it can completely change the course of the game for you. And especially they said there's one mode, it's called Tactician mode, where the idea of this mode is for those Dungeons and Dragons games you've played where the DM is just a son of a bitch that just does everything to fuck with you. That they're like really like shit's gonna go wrong all the time for you, but that's the fun of it essentially.
That's so
Baldur's Gate 3 has me very interested because of this cool, like it just seems like a really interesting way to play a game. Like I said, it's D&D, but like a video game. Sounds cool.
I've got the final class, Patrick, And the final class is the class that I feel like I would play.
Okay.
Because this is the type of class I would play in D&D.
Okay.
This is called the Wild Magic Barbarian. What is
God.
it? A barbarian who loves magic, but isn't the best at controlling it. Pick this class if you want to surprise both enemies and yourself.
Unbelievable.
Apparently, the whole build of this class, right, is that as you're just hacking and slashing away at enemies, just random magic spells that can both help and hurt you will just randomly go off.
It sounds like a really fun time,
dude.
Honestly.
That is it's just, yeah, dude. I've never been like, I mean, Baldur's Gate has historically been more of like a PC game.
Yeah.
But this is going to come out to all console, or at least PlayStation 5. I want to say it's all consoles.
I think it might. Let me double check. I think it might just be PC and PlayStation. Let me see.
Okay. Because I do know it's coming to PlayStation. Right. I know that for a fact. I'm not sure about Xbox. I know there's no.
Yeah, no, Windows and PlayStation and Mac. So PC or computer and PlayStation.
But like the idea of like such an immersive sim like this, especially like one that's so heavily involved with the world of D&D and like rolling and like having that chance factor, you know, is so exciting to me.
Sounds cool.
It does. It sounds fucking awesome, and you get to fuck a bear. The one downside, I don't know if we addressed this last week, was like there's apparently like 376 hours of cutscenes.
Right. Yeah.
That's the one side that's like, because that's the one thing I think with Final Fantasy 16 that kills me a little bit is like, there's a lot of times where like, I'm like, I'll tell Sid we're about to sit down for dinner. I've been playing video games while she cooks. And then I'll be like, all right, yeah, let me finish this one thing and then we'll eat. And then we have to like, what we watch while we eat is a fucking Final Fantasy cutscene because it goes on 15 minutes.
Yes.
And like, I don't want to not know what's going on in the game.
Yeah. 174 hours, which is still insane. Like, sure, it's technically half of what you said, but that is still longer than most any video game.
It's less than half of what I said,
just in cutscenes. But yeah, no, I'm interested for sure.
Yeah.
And so the funny thing, PlayStation only in terms of console. You know what day it comes out?
Oh God,
September 6th, same day that Starfield comes out. So hey. Xbox players will get to be traveling through thousands of star systems, and us on PlayStation get to fuck bears.
Fucking bears. Okay, hear me out, Patrick. The trade-off. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. As I'm working on my home theater, that was like one of the things I was like, I really want to get this done before Starfield comes out. So I can play Starfield on like a massive TV in my basement. So Sid can be upstairs playing her, putting in her 100 and her next 100 hours of D&D, and I could be in the basement. But, I don't think we're going to get that done in time for Starfield, as I realize it's only a couple months away.
I believe in you.
You
got 2 months, brother.
Unless I either win the lottery or get a huge pay raise real soon. I highly doubt.
Any minute now. Fucking iHeartRadio is going to come kicking down our door, giving us a fat sack of cash.
Yeah.
Any minute now. Oh, yeah. Oh, I think I hear him on the door, so we better go. If you want to follow me, I'm at Patrick Schwag on Twitter, at PSchwag on Threads. You can follow the pod on Spot Games Pod on Twitter and Spotlight Games Pod everywhere else. Cayman, where can they follow you? Where can they follow Save Trash Cinema?
You can follow me at the Dumpster Boy on Twitter. You can follow Save Trash Cinema on all socials, including Threads. If you haven't caught up with all of the episodes we've released so far, there's like 75 of them, and at least 10 are good. So,
all right, brother. Until next week,
brother.